Whether or not you voted for President-elect Donald J. Trump, what is likely to matter most is, ultimately, how Trump administration policies affect your wallet. Mr. Trump's stunning upset will be in America's history books for generations. But what happens next, policies, people, and politics, will ultimately determine whether history treats him as kindly as his hero, Ronald Reagan. President Trump will have to work with Speaker Paul Ryan or whoever is the next Speaker of the House of Representatives. Assuming Paul Ryan retains his post, his proposals and comments will carry weight in the months ahead. It's certain both want the same thing, a federal tax law that's easier and good for economic growth. As a practical matter, revenue bills start in the House of Representatives, so Mr. Ryan holds the key to the nation's purse strings. Mr. Ryan is well-versed in tax policy and economics, perhaps more so than the President-elect. President-elect Trump's U.S. first foreign policy is likely to take shape in a change to tax laws to encourage repatriating money from overseas. Bringing money back could put tens of billions of dollars to work in America, boosting jobs and wages. More than the U.S. first policy, your personal financial situation is likely to be affected directly by coming tax reform legislation. Mr. Trump's victory empowers those who favor a smaller federal government, those who abhor the complexity of the U.S. tax code and the volumes of regulation surrounding it. We're about to see a legislative overhaul similar to the watershed tax reform law of 1986, which came amid the height of the Reagan era. In the mid-'80s, massive tax reform enacted during Ronald Reagan's second term was followed by a time when the U.S. was the world's only superpower. If the country is headed in this direction again, then expect a broadening of the tax base, reduced rates, and simplification of the code. Obamacare is probably going to be drastically changed, although a couple of remnants may remain. In addition, Dodd-Frank legislation, the 2,300-page bulwark of the Obama administration's regulatory framework, erected after the global financial crisis, will almost certainly be reconstructed, perhaps drastically. What does it mean to you, and what steps should you take now? Generally, you want to defer income and accelerate taking losses on bad investments. Evaluate whether you need to buy business equipment now or wait for a new law, which is likely to allow a better deduction to business owners on expensing the purchases. If you need a new copy machine that's $25,000, maybe you choose to buy it next year instead of buying now. Don't take any actions that would trigger income or gift taxes. And if you have a taxable estate, you may want to consider making gifts of capital gain assets to heirs in the coming months. The Trump administration is expected to simplify the tax code by reducing the number of brackets from the current total of 7 to 3. 12%, 25%, and 33% brackets have been proposed. If rates are going down, you want to defer income this year and capture lower rates in the future. You want to accelerate the recognition of losses to offset higher rates now. If we're going to have lower rates in the future, should you be doing Roth conversions? Probably not. That's something we're going to keep you updated on and requires personal counsel. The marriage penalty may finally be eliminated, so you might want to consider tying the knot. You may also be happy to hear that child care expenses are likely to be excluded from taxation, perhaps without any limits. The estate tax is likely to be eliminated, but heirs may face capital gains tax, which is a new wrinkle. The alternative minimum tax, an onerous calculations millions of Americans are forced to make annually, is probably history. It's hard to imagine anyone missing it. One rule that could change any time now affects stretch IRAs. IRAs that stretch the deferral on paying income tax to the next generation are popular, and this technique has been widely used for many years. Stay tuned to our news stream for more on this in the days ahead. Republicans have proposed a postcard-size income tax form for families. Filing a return would look something like this. This might affect the lower 60 or 70% of tax filers. However, The exemption parents receive for each child and many other deductions would be eliminated. The big picture. Tax simplification could redeploy brainpower currently spent on designing tax schemes into more constructive endeavors. Instead of many Americans' best minds designing dodgy tax schemes, they can spend their careers working in science, technology, engineering, and math, highly productive endeavors that grow the economy and are beneficial to the entire world as well as Americans. Even those who voted against Mr. Trump may find reason for optimism in his economic policies, but his success is far from assured. Tax cuts either require spending cuts or running up the national debt. Keeping his promise to rebuild the nation's infrastructure is going to require Mr. Trump to increase spending and run up the debt, at least in the immediate future. In addition, the 4% growth rate Mr. Trump promised is mathematically impossible, given the trajectory of demographic trends. The fact is, the working age proportion of the U.S. population is simply not growing enough to support a 4% rate of growth in GDP. Fortunately, however, Mr. Trump has some runway. The day of reckoning does not come until around 2026, when the cost of interest paid to maintain Social Security, Medicare, and other entitlement programs will soar rapidly and threaten the nation's solvency. Mr. Trump ascends to the presidency at a time of strong economic growth, and his first 100 days comes as the economy is growing at 3.1%, the best growth rate in years, which is likely to galvanize his support. While the changes in tax laws are likely to be massive, this is not the first time the federal tax laws have been reformed. We'll help you stay focused on what's important right here as the financial planning and wealth management landscape changes.